Hi, Andrew. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Andrew Paris. I'm 59 years old and I live in Houston, Texas, and I am a remote television broadcast engineer. So it means I travel around the country and sometimes the world doing remote broadcasts. I'm in Eugene, Oregon right now doing the US Olympic team track and field trials for NBC Sports.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. So, I, what are all the types of events that you've covered before?
Oh, you name it, I've done it. Everything for the Olympics down to boxing. I normally do golf. I've been on doing golf the last 8 years, but I've done, like I said, the Olympics. I've done four Olympics at this point, and tennis, football, basketball, baseball, the Super Bowls, World Series, everything. It's just something you do. I've been doing this for about 40 years. I grew up in it. I have three other brothers who also in television, and my dad was in television all the way back to the 50s, so I'm second generation. And remote television is just kind of the best place to be for the new technology and for all the it's the I don't want to say best the top for engineering, but it's the most challenging for all engineers because you're constantly in different venues, different situations, and so forth like that.
It's kind of interesting thinking about television technology. I mean, the definition's gotten better. The color, of course, is good. Now you have like what 8K, I guess, is fairly
8K is
common.
possible, yes. 4K is getting to be the norm, and HDR, high dynamic range, that's really the game changer, regardless of what number of lines you use. 4K, 8K, 2K, HDR is really the big thing now because it makes just makes the picture just better looking no matter what you do.
And 3D was kind of has gone through its phases, but really hasn't become like a normal.
Yeah, 3D was interesting. I actually got involved with 3D back in 2010. I helped build and operated the ESPN 3D truck for 3 years. The 3 years the network was up. And it was a serious technological challenge, both from the broadcast side, but also getting the broadcasts out there because it was essentially just two channels of video, but you had to have the right kind of convergence kind of TVs. And to be honest, it turned out that it was the money behind ESPN 3D was actually coming from Sony and Vizio, and they paid for a lot of it, hoping to generate the interest, and it just never took off because of the glasses, that kind of thing. But it was great to do it when we did. We did all the X Games in 3D, which was that if you sit down and watch it, it's when 3D is done right, it is amazing. Problem is there were a lot of people doing 3D wrong, and that's kind of what killed it. It was a craze, obviously.
And then, like the Oculus and these virtual reality type things. I mean, you have sort of, in addition to 3D, the idea of being self-directed in terms of what you're paying attention to.
Yes, that's a very big trend in the live sports area. In fact, the show we're doing right now for NBC Sports has several Oculus type cameras out there. We're not handling the feeds of them, but they piggyback on some of our cameras, and it's handled by a separate vendor, so people can put on their goggles and look around on the track and watch the events as they happen. Um, there were some attempts, something similar to that, in the multi-channel broadcast area years ago where we would do any given sport. We would do not only would we do a program cut, but we'd also transmit all the other cameras to websites, and people could cut their own show essentially. And once again, that was kind of a trend because when a camera is not on the air in line, it's doing other things. It's zooming, it's focusing, and stuff, panning and stuff, and that's very distracting to people. So that one kind of fell away. But the new virtual immersion technology, I think, has got a lot of promise.
And I guess that brings us to today's topic about. I mean, I presume you knew that we're planning to send astronauts to the moon in
Oh
2024.
yeah, I have to confess something. I didn't just buy this T-shirt because I like NASA. I used to work for NASA. I worked for NASA for 13 years back in the 80s and 90s. I did 3 years doing shuttle landings out at Dryden, which is now Armstrong. Um, and I started up. I was hired on for the post Challenger time after return to flight after Challenger. So I did 3 years of covering shuttle landings out there, essentially remote television. Instead of having a truck with multi cameras, we had one truck, one camera, but we had multiple that ran around the lake bed and did landing. And we also did support to Dryden's NASA facility. And then I moved back to Houston, where I had lived before, and worked at Johnson Space Center for 10 years. And I was lucky enough, our TV contract had some really unique things that we supported the scuba diving at the WEDF and the NBL, where the astronauts train for weightless environment for EVAs. And I was a scuba diver, camera diver. We'd have cameras and part of the safety team. And then I also flew on the Vomit Comet for several years, which was by far the most fun. It was also the most, they call it the Vomit Comet for a reason. And yes, I did. And it was one of those things you just got out of the way and then you go work and enjoy yourself best you can. I also got to travel around the world to help document construction of the International Space Station. So I had 3 trips to Russia, to Moscow, to Star City, and then I was able to go to Kazakhstan, to Baikonur, for the launch of the first space station crew and get to document that too. So I was very fortunate when I worked at NASA to get to take my television skills and apply them to NASA. And of course, I was a child of the space program. I was born in '61, just in time to watch it all as I grew up. And in fact, the one moment that really solidified my love of space was the Apollo 8 Christmas Eve broadcast in 1968. I remember as a kid, because you were watching that stuff and it's like, oh, that's space. But then that evening we watched it, it was just something that struck me and it stuck with me ever since. And it actually drove me to, when I had a chance to take my talents, my television talents, to NASA, it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. Got to hang out with the astronauts and stuff like that.
Um, well, there's a lot in that I like to delve into. One about the Vomit Comet. I went on a zero G flight with my 2 sons.
Uh-huh.
So I had a little bit of experience with it, and I was so afraid of vomiting and all that I didn't eat anything the night before. Of course, they tell you, uh, that's like a rookie mistake. Just eat low acidic foods and
Yeah,
don't stuff
exactly.
yourself.
I learned that lesson the hard. My check flight. Actually, my check flight was canceled because of mechanical problems, and then the next day they had a slot open, so I had to, like, with an hour's notice, had to get ready to go. And I hadn't eaten. I said, "Well, I just won't eat," and I was miserable the whole time. And of course, all the old hands says, "Yeah, yeah, you gotta, put something in your stomach." And even after that, I still had issues. And so one of the crew chiefs showed me a little trick about just kind of shake your head a couple times and then you'll throw up and then you're done. You just drop the bag and go to work. Because I actually had to work. I had to operate cameras and so forth. So couldn't play a little time. There was a little play in between there. But yeah, you just have to listen to the pros. They know what's going on.
I think your experience is probably a lot different than mine. Having to actually look through a camera, I could see that could be disorienting.
It was very much. It was very tough to do that. We tried to set things up, do the viewfinder viewing. We had a set day or a prep day the day before whenever we set stuff up, and we would also include putting small monitors. At the time they had 5 and 6 inch LCD monitors were available, and so we would use those. And it was more so everybody else could see what's going on. Because you had a lot of times they're supporting experiments, and we had investigators there, and they wanted to see what's going also, but they didn't want to have to look through the viewfinder. So we set up a little monitor. So you tend to use the monitor more than looking through the viewfinder because, yeah, when you close that one eye and you start looking in there, you're going, yeah, this is not what I want to do.
But whenever I read like science fiction books about they're weightless and they feel like they're falling and they're about to upchuck, I didn't have any of that sensation. Whenever you kind of start that the parabola, I just felt light, and I didn't feel like I was falling or anything. I just felt floating, and
Yeah. Well,
um,
I think some of that I shared the same experience. I never had that feeling because it was just too short. I think when you're exposed to it for longer periods of time, it's days and days and days. The first couple of days, that's when you start getting that kind of feeling. Because when you're doing the parabs, you're going 0G, 2G, 0G, 2G. Your body hasn't got time to really acclimate to it. And I've read, and I've actually talked to a few astronauts about their flights, specifically the phenomena of the space adaptation syndrome. Some people go up there and they're perfectly fine, have no problems. Other people, they get up there, the first couple hours, they're puking, but then they're done with it and the body acclimates. And it's interesting, they found out through some studies that couch potatoes, people who are pretty vegetative and don't do a lot of work, do great on that first couple days because they're already kind of in that state. And but they do horribly later because they're physically out of shape, and the return to 1G really hurts them. So there's like one of those things like, which one do I want to be? Do I want to be the couch potato? Or do I want to be the guy who maybe gets sick, but I'm doing good the next couple weeks kind of thing? And I always thought that was very interesting. But you know, if you're going to be an astronaut, you have to be in shape because you got to be able to deal with a lot of other problems.
Yeah, that's the classic personal conflict, short term versus long term.
Yep. Yep.
Um, well, you know, I've talked to a couple of Apollo deniers as part of this project, which I want to talk to as wide range of people as possible.
Mhm.
And both of them kind of said the reason they thought they had their doubts was because of the quality of the pictures during the Apollo landing. And I was just wondering, what your take is on that.
Well, no, the broader sense of the deniers, there, I had to deal with those at NASA when I was there. And I was a contractor. I wasn't a Fed, but I was a contractor. But you had to deal with it because I was also part of public affairs office. I dealt with that stuff too. So yeah, the official position is fine. You can think what you want. And there's that first time you meet somebody and you want to like, oh no, I can convince them. I can show them all the evidence. Those are people that doesn't matter. They've decided to be obtuse. They've decided to go the other way, and that's how they want to live their life, and that's fine. If you want to live your life that way, too bad, because you're missing out on so much really great stuff. So that's fine. If they want to believe that's fine. The rest of us, hey, if we get a chance to go to space, go into space, and you can sit there and but as far as the picture quality and the whole did we fake it kind of thing, working in the television industry, well, I could tell you specifically about the reason the camera picture quality from the moon was because they use field sequential camera, well, black and white, and also field sequential cameras for the color. A field sequential camera is a black and white camera with a red, green, and blue color wheel that spins in front of it, and then it moves at a specific speed. You get 15 frames, and there's a little flag when the green comes up, and a signal comes back to the ground, and you put it through a converter and converts it into color. That was the best technology available back then. They were pushing limits. In fact, that's if the television you used to watch back when it was the analog days, NTSC, that was the predecessor to color television. And so when NASA was looking for a system to do color television, they went back and looked and see what was available. And the field sequential had a very minimal bandwidth, so that was what they used. They didn't actually switch to standard NTSC cameras till well into the shuttle program. The shuttle program used the color wheel field sequential camera for many, many, many years. And so if you want to say the picture quality, okay, great. There's for every theory, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. And like I said, these people can't be convinced. Then I think at a personal level, they like the attention, even if it's a negative attention kind of thing.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's the benefit of being an undecided voter too. You actually have candidates talk to you.
Oh,
Um, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking I should have asked him about UFOs because the picture quality is like exact opposite on the
Yeah.
UFO front.
Oh, yeah. I was just reading about the NASA's. Everybody's excited about the report, the UFO UAP report that's supposed to be coming out from the DoD, and NASA's been told, hey, you got to look at this, and NASA's like, what are we going to do with it? We don't have a plan for that kind of thing. So
We're still working on space traffic management for our own stuff.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
So as part of Artemis, we're sending 4 astronauts to the vicinity of the moon, 2 of which will actually go down to the surface. And in my discussions with people, I get the sense that a lot of them really don't see the value in the space program or going to the moon. But whenever you talk about them personally going, their interest really perks up.
Mhm.
And so, as a TV guy who has made a living of taking people who aren't there and making them feel like they are there, what's your advice or thoughts on how we take the 6 or 7 billion of us that can't go to the moon and make it feel like that we're actually participating in that in a meaningful way?
Well, I can talk to you about that in several different directions. One of the things growing up in junior high and high school, one thing that was studied was one of the NASA's big pushing points was that for every penny spent on NASA, the return in new technologies and medicines and so forth, it was like in the dollars and $2 and $3. So it's a good investment. I mean, we have all the technology we have today, cell phones that's all a direct result of the space program, the space race. things like this push the technology and make us better people. We find ways to do things because when you're trying to figure out how to keep people alive on the moon or out in deep space, you find ways to create new technology that's better humanity. The International Space Station, people don't go, well, what are we doing on there? The amount of medical research they have done on the space station, they still are going through data, trying to process all that stuff. This is all about. It's also about exploration. We are explorers, and we've explored. The Earth pretty much been explored. We got to find our next destination, our next place to explore. So the moon, the Mars, near Earth, our solar system is the obvious next place. And that will generate new technologies and new things to better mankind. It's part of our DNA to do this. This is just the latest version, and it's really about history. I have as I've aged, I'm 59 now, so I'll be 60 this year. I like to think of myself as a amateur historian, space historian mostly, but learning from the past is one of the most important things. The old line about you're destined to repeat the past if you don't study the past, but also you can't improve your future if you don't know where you're coming from. You have to see the bigger picture, and so just knowing where we've been will help us show us where we're going. Basically, the way I put it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to know you're 59. I tell you, I'm looking at you, I would say you're in your 40s, for
Oh,
sure.
I am completely. I accept the fact that my DNA is. I'm the luckiest guy in the world because of my DNA. I have three other brothers, and they're all. I'm 5'7". They're all over 6 foot, but they've lost their hair. So I'm on the good side of that. But I got two grandkids too, so that makes me feel old with the grandkids.
Oh, I know. Being called grandpa is like, there should be
Oh,
something against that.
I love it.
Oh, you love it? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
I've got grandpa. I'm grandpa, and what else am I? My wife's here with me. I can't remember everything. I've got two grandkids who are learning to talk, and one of them's in France, and she's learning English and French simultaneously. I think I'm grand-père for there.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, coming back to the return on investment for the space program, I mean, if we discover something fundamental that is completely unknown, I mean, what's the price of learning about electromagnetism, as an example? I mean,
Oh
just
yeah,
that fundamental law. I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation without that. Cell phones
ex-
would be useful, you know.
yeah, exactly.
And I keep thinking, you know, humanity, like fish, have no concept of what wet is because they're constantly in it.
Yep,
And all of us pretty much experience a 24-hour day, 1 g of gravity, 1 atmosphere of pressure, and we have very similar type of physical environments. I just wonder whenever we start having a lot of observers go and be in completely different environments, what might be hidden to us now becomes suddenly obvious.
oh yeah, obviously the human body is an amazing machine. It's very good at adapting, and I remember as a kid they were worried about when the first astronauts were going, humans were going into space. So, their eyeballs would float out of their head, and all kinds of things because they just didn't know. And until you go there, you don't know. And so, like I said, part of our the exploring. And here's a great line. This sounds stupid to some people, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's kind of the exciting part of exploration, whether it be in the ocean or under a microscope or going out in space. And the more we learn about not only like the moon and Mars and Venus helps us learn about our planet. Obviously, with climate change going on, we got a lot to do in a hurry, and so pushing the technology to get us off the planet to learn. Like they just announced NASA's going to do two probes to Venus. Uh, they had two. I forget the name of the program, but it's uh, their new technology type stuff, and they picked two to go to Venus. And then ESA, the European Space Agency, like a couple days later, announced that they're sending a probe to Venus because they pretty much, Mars is that we've got a lot of hardware there on Mars, and we're learning what we can. We have a general idea what's going on with Mars. Now it's Venus. Why did Venus end up that way? Because Venus was very much like Earth, and considering the heat that I live in Houston. I'm currently in Eugene, fortunately, because it's cooler here. But Houston, they're having power grid problems in Texas because of the heat. And you've got to start paying attention to this stuff. You can't let other people worry about it. You got to help make the change. That's why I try to encourage people. Hey, NASA is not just sending people into space. There's way more to it, and space in general. I mean, you've got the private companies, the SpaceX's, the Blue Origins. That's our future. You gotta start paying attention to space. And even if people are like not interested in going to space, you know, kind of careers, kind of money you can make going into space. I mean, that's another thing.
Well, absolutely. I think the 2020s are going to be to space what the 1990s were to the internet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a great analogy.
In fact, I think the 2020s is what everybody thought the 1970s was going to be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting. You should say that because from a historical standpoint, there were a lot of great plans. The follow on to moon landings. I mean, Apple Plus's For All Mankind gives you kind of a glimpse of that. You know, like Sea Dragon. You know, you've heard of Sea Dragon, right?
I have heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to see them actually show that in the show, that's mind blowing. I mean, I read about Sea Dragon, going, well, yeah, that's, you know, it's all drawings and still pictures, but to actually see them use that was impressive. And all the things, the follow-ons to the spacecraft, whether you follow the history of All Mankind or not, there was a lot of, they were talking about, they were planning trips to Venus and Mars, flybys of Venus and Mars using Apollo hardware, and you know, in the late 70s. And you can imagine what life would be like if we had done that. But government's budgets and what they are, and that's, having worked at NASA, I'm very, very sensitive to budgets, because essentially about 1997, I was there in Johnson from 2000, from 91 to 2000, or 90 to 2000. Anyway, about 1997, the contract I was on, they changed formats. Rather than being a we give you a big bunch of money and just do everything we tell you to do, to, okay, we're going to give you a basic skeleton infrastructure money, and then all that other stuff you guys used to do. Now you got to find clients to pay for it. And so the budget started dwindling very quickly. And this was as we were building to space station. They were building hardware, and the budgets were shifting around. And I realized NASA was running out of money to do television. And so that's when I decided I had to go looking back out to the broadcast world. And so by 2000, I'd found a job. Went to work for Mark Cuban and started a network called HDNet, which was another new technology I got to play. I actually got to start playing with HD back in '95 at NASA. The NHK and JAXA did a joint project where they were flying HD camcorders on shuttle flights. So I got to start playing because nobody else knew what to do with it. So I said, I'll figure it out. I'll learn. And that's one thing about television, regardless of what my dad did back in the 50s to now, television is still basically the same thing. You got a camera, you take pictures, you bring it back, you mix it with other stuff, you put some audio, and you send it out. It's just because it's analog or digital or IP, it doesn't mean it's the same thing. It's the same basic idea.
Um, and I guess coming back to how do we bring 7 billion people with us on the trip to the moon? What are
Mhm.
your thoughts there?
Well, that's a tough one. NASA has a tough job in the public affairs trying to inform people. It takes a lot of external excitement from NASA. NASA can only generate so much buzz. I mean, they're doing their best with internet, with the web presence, with social media, and NASA actually sometimes has problems keeping the message, staying on message. Different directorates and different divisions of NASA, I've noticed, have uh, can't seem to stay with the same message. Are you familiar with the website NASA Watch?
I am, yes.
Okay, well, then you
In
know what
fact,
I'm talking.
I interviewed Keith.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I have yet to meet him. I really want to meet and talk to him because I've discovered his website when I was still at NASA, but it was like, don't tell anybody you're there, you know, because that back then it was really a taboo website, you know, because they was exposing things and so forth. But yeah, I have my morning routine where I light up, I get my computer and I start looking at NASAspaceflight.com, you know, spaceflight now, and I'm always NASA Watch to see what Keith and those guys are doing. And I think he's a necessary, I don't say evil, he's a necessary component of the whole bigger picture, because he's trying to keep NASA on their toes. But back to getting the message out, they like I said, it's tough for NASA to get people excited, but all the commercial space flight stuff going on with SpaceX and Blue Origin and Rocket Lab and Sierra Nevada, that is generating a lot of buzz, and they need to look at how they're doing it. NASA needs to look at the way that they're making people interested in going to space, and kind of use that as a guide. But I personally try to do everything I can to inform other people about what's going on, because there are still people, and this is amazing. People, I live in Clear Lake, which is near NASA. I never moved after I stopped working there, and I have neighbors who know NASA's there, but haven't had no idea we still had a man's presence in space. They thought the Russians were running everything. And so you go, oh, no, no, they'll say, well, isn't Johnson Space Center shutting down? No, God, we've had a space station for 20 years. I've told you, I've showed you the slides from my trip to Kazakhstan when we launched it. Oh, yeah. So it's about keeping NASA's job, but it's about keeping their story up front, keeping them in the minds of people. And like I said, they're doing the best they can, but sometimes they have trouble keeping keeping on point, I think is the whole thing. And they need all the help they can. It's just large. Of course, it's larger than just NASA. It's the whole space program, whether it be American, Russian, European, Chinese. The Chinese, I'm just really enjoying watching them putting their first space station up and seeing, because I got a lot of the Chinese space program is basically a copy of the Russian space program. They've copied all their hardware, but they've made improvements on it. And part of my trips to Moscow for the International Space Station construction was to actually crawl through the unfinished FGB and service module. And so I've got a pretty good understanding of what that hardware looks like. And so then I'll see the Chinese version going, yeah, that's exactly like I remember it.
That is, it's interesting. Hopefully, the Chinese progress keeps pressure on America and Europe
Oh
and
yeah,
Japan to make progress.
perfect timing. You couldn't have come at a better time. The whole Artemis program, the push for that was a little shaky to begin with, and then when the Trump administration came in and pushed for it, they were obviously going for PR for that kind of thing, and for whatever however you think about it, it was a good start. It was the best start we could expect in the conditions, and to see the Biden administration step up and say, yeah, we support it, because it's always been, one administration supports it and the next one doesn't. So it's this flip flop back and forth. The old Freedom. I remember I was at NASA when there was the Freedom space station, and then that kind of went away, and then it came back as the ISS, and then also the I'm trying to remember what the name of the predecessor to the SLS, and that whole thing was going to be. Oh Lord, I can see the posters right now.
It's
The
like
Ares.
the Aries, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Ares and that whole project that kind of came and went, but some of the hardware's transferred over and so forth like that. So yeah, keeping NASA relevant and also keeping them budgeted is really tough. And the Chinese advances in the Chinese program really are going to help us in the long term, because we can't be second. We have to step up. And the flip side of that is the Russian space program. I've followed the Russian space program as long as I could remember. And unfortunately, they're in a situation where they can't afford what they're doing right now. So that's why they were the price of space seats on the Soyuz, the space station, went up, because it was essentially their only income. And now they're struggling to find other, excuse me, they're struggling to find other revenue streams. And unfortunately, Russian pride, what it is, you probably have seen a lot of the verbose statements coming out of the Russian space program about, well, we're going to leave the space station, we're going to go off and build our own, and and we're going to do this deal with the Chinese, and to me, it's a lot of hot air, but they need to concentrate on what the best thing they do, and that's putting things into orbit. And they seem to be stuck in their old ways, and it's very sad. I watched a drain. They had a lot of knowledge drain in the 90s and the 2000s, when the older engineers were leaving, or in some cases, there were engineers during the early day of the space station that were immigrating to the States, taking jobs with, USA and other contractors. And so they really haven't been able to replace a lot of their knowledge. And that's another problem they have to deal with. But we need the competition. We need everybody to be involved. And the knowledge base and their history, they can't be left behind. So, and I think the smart people at NASA and in our government know that's true. I mean, we've always done our best to support them. They don't deserve to fall away. They need to be brought along with us. And hopefully the Chinese competition will help them too.
I just worried though. I mean, if we compete with the Chinese in the arena of space exploration and development, I think that'd be fantastic. But I have come across kind of like a darker side to some American views about I was talking to somebody about, you know, China putting a space station up there, like, oh, we should shoot it down, you know. And then you look at kind of our approach of like the Iranian nuclear program with like sabotage,
Hmm.
and you also think about, you know, you have this choice: do you want to spend $100 billion to potentially compete with China, or would you like to spend, you know, $5 billion and sabotage them? You know, like the whole crabs in a bucket type of
Yeah,
phenomenon.
exactly. Yeah, well, you have to look once again. You got to look longer term. If you look back at the way the breakup of the Soviet Union and how NASA stepped up to so they wouldn't lose all that technology. And let's be honest, we wouldn't have the International Space Station if it wasn't for Russia. They had the hardware sitting there ready to go, and so it behooved us to bring them in as a partner. And that's eventually you talk about bigger picture. Eventually, mankind will join together and fly to the stars. And this is just the steps. China has proven themselves to be slow and methodical, but they didn't have to fly 7 or 8 flights to get where they're at. They studied it, they looked at history, they did their homework, and they took in their time. And that's fine. That's how it should be, um, or how they've chosen to be to make it happen. But we need to be more about what can we do to make things better. If like people don't realize that we've had for over 20 years, we've had a working agreement with the International Space Station with the Russians. With all the other political intrigue and all the other things that go on, we've continued to cooperate with the Russians because we kept it about science and space and nothing else. And I, to this day, am still amazed that it hasn't been broken because of all the things that have happened. But that's because the scientists and the administrators all know better. For the lack of a better word, they're the adults in the room, and they have made it happen. The astronauts, the cosmonauts, they all are kindred spirits. They all know that, and I'm sure that the taikonauts, is that what a Chinese astronauts taikonaut?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've I've never used that word out loud yet. I've only read it. The taikonauts will feel the same way, and their scientists and engineers are kindred spirits to our scientists and the Russian scientists and so forth. And same with ESA, same with any other country that decides to do that stuff. And that's important that as a space community, all of us don't take it to the negative, keep it to positive. Yeah, you can negate talk politics and talk stuff like that, but it doesn't help anybody. You got to think what helps people, what helps us, what helps push this forward. And my kids, my 2 kids, both grew up in a house where pro space. In fact, my son ended up working at Space Center Houston for several years. And when you go to work there, you start off like maybe scooping ice cream or sweeping and stuff. But because he had grown up around me, he had such an intense knowledge of space history and space program that they automatically moved him up to the tram tour guide. The person who gives them, they just moved him right up there because he knew everything already. There apparently was a questionnaire that asked you several questions, and one of them was like, what's the what I forget what the wording of the question, but essentially was, what was the date for the first human in space? Well, it's April 12th, 1961. I can't get that date right, but it happens to also be the launch of the first shuttle, 1981. And he wrote that in there. And I said, "You're showing off," but it got him there. So anything, you can probably tell I'm excited about space. And as 59, I'm amazed I still have that kind of energy about something. And even like we start talking about going into space, that was one of your questions, was if it was safe and affordable, would you go into space? Absolutely. I actually said out loud that day after the Challenger accident, if somebody asked me, would you get on a shuttle the next day after the Challenger accident? I said yes, because what happened there, they'll figure it out. NASA, we make mistakes, but we learn from our mistakes and we move forward. And so going into space is something I've wanted to do realistically all my life. I mean, there's certain levels as a child, yeah, I want to go into space. But then as you get older, you go, well, I didn't have at the time when I was going to college age, the requirements for astronauts were still too strict. You couldn't use correct lenses and, that kind of thing. But it's all also opened up. Now you're talking about all the commercial space and space tourism. And I've been re-energized by it. You're familiar with Space Hero, I'm sure, right?
Yep. The Space Hero, and
You
also Discover, the
Discovery. Yeah.
channel Who Wants to Be an
Are you a
Astronaut.
space hero? Are you a Space Hero insider?
Well, that's a kind of a difficult question to answer. I did apply, I did get accepted, I did participate, but I couldn't find a way to stay effectively engaged, so I've kind of
Yeah, and
drifted away.
that's what they're dealing with right now. That they have the discourse community that they decided to shut down because it wasn't active enough. I think in that particular case, they're learning about social media and how it works, and they've taken a step back. And they have a very actually Space Hero has a very very steep incline, a steep mountain to climb with their because they're planning a 15 episodes over 30 years. So they're looking for a carriage agreement and partners that are willing to spend that kind of time and money. And that's in the world of reality TV shows, that's unheard of. My son actually spent some time in Hollywood being a PA all over the place, and he worked on several of them. And they barely, it's a 1 year contract, and not even that, 1 season contract. You shoot for 6 weeks, and then you edit, and you're airing, in 6 months, and then they're done. So nobody really thinks of reality television as a long-term thing, but they're trying to change people's minds. But I joined as soon as the press release dropped back in September. I joined, and I'm trying to support the best I can. And I wasn't a real big social media maven, and so I've had to learn about social media and Twitter. I mean, I was a little bit in Reddit and things like that, but I've been pushing on it. Another Space Hero Insider, Digital Storm, and I started the Reddit subreddit for Space Hero, and it's struggling because there's just there's just so little information about it. I know Deb oh, can't remember the gentleman's name now. The other co-founder,
Yeah, I just lost it. Reamer,
Reamer.
Thomas Reamer.
Thomas and Deborah are putting themselves out all over the place, which I think is great. And I try to follow them and get involved with it when I can. But my work schedule doesn't allow me to do a lot of the conference calls and Zoom calls, stuff like that. But I'm trying to spread the word. The Inspiration 4 crew. I'm actively
Yeah, I got
talking.
my
Yeah,
Inspiration
you got
4
your
shirt
I4. I
on.
saw that. I have my blue I4. I just booked hotel rooms, hotel room at Canaveral area, the Cape area, for the week of the 15th. That's their target date, and booked tickets for my wife and I to go see it. We've actually been out to see 2 of the 3 Falcon Heavy launches, and then I was actually there for the Crew 2 launch. That's one thing about doing golf. You spend a lot of time in Florida. And so if the timing's right, I've driven a couple hours. I have to admit, I've driven a couple hours and lost some sleep just so I could watch a launch, which is still the most exciting thing to me. It's I was fortunate enough to see about a dozen launches, shuttle launches during my career. And they're from various locations. There's some good ones and some bad ones, but I got to see they're always exciting no matter what happens. But I was fortunate enough to see 2 of them from 2 very unique perspectives. One is the family viewing area, which I was a guest of Jim Baker. Jim Baker, yeah. Anyway, his wife Deidre was one of our producers on our contract, and so I was there actually for 2 launches. One where they count down, and the countdown stopped at like 0.26 seconds. The computer stopped because of an engine problem, so I got to come back and actually watch one. And that distance is amazing. It's just I still I can, the emotions are still there, because one of the things I did also do was I forced myself not to watch it through a camera to take pictures, because one thing I discovered working in television, you see so many launches through a viewfinder or through the screen that you lose the perspective of it. You just have the shuttle flying up and flying around. And so I forced myself to not do that. Everybody else had their cameras or video cameras, and I'm like, I forced myself. And I have the specific memory of watching the launch. It was the launch that morning. It was a early morning launch, so the sun was very low on the horizon, and there was a very, very thin cloud deck. I don't remember how high, but it was about 30 seconds after launch, it hit that cloud deck, and it threw a shadow all the way to infinity. And I can remember I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. And the other one that was really interesting was the SDS 97, I believe it was. It was one with Eileen Collins was the first commander. That's the one. It was the first commander, and we were covering it as part of a series of interviews. Eileen Collins, the commander, had started interviewing a lot of the first female World War II pilots who were the ones who were supposed to become astronauts, who were going to be the the first female astronauts back in the 60s, which didn't come out. That's a whole nother piece of history. But before we went over about a week before and started interviewing all these different women, female pilots, and getting essentially it was oral history, getting their histories. And so as part of that, she got us permission to go watch the launch, record the launch from what's called Astronaut Road, which is, I don't even know if that's the official title, but it's where when the astronauts want to go watch a launch, they go out, and it's just a little about northwest of the Pad 39. And I don't think it's even on a map. It's barely a road. There's actually, I think there was a concrete platform for setting up cameras or whatever. And so we watched from there. And I didn't know it at the time, but we were just under 1.5 miles from the launch site. And so that's not where you want to be when some of those things are. But the thunder, the thunder on the chest it's as close to religious experience as I'll ever have. It's still, and one thing on that launch, unfortunately, I could not watch it because I was forced to, because it was a night launch, I had to operate the iris on the camera because the shuttle's all lit up, and then when it lights up and it gets off the pad, that flame is so bright that it just blows the cameras out. Well, I didn't have the proper equipment with me at the time because it was kind of a last minute decision. So I had to take a monitor and set the level so I could see it, and I had to manually iris it myself. And it's tough. And I knew, we rehearsed it, my cameraman with me, Mark Turner, and I rehearsed it several times that, when it launches, I would iris it and so forth. And I couldn't resist the urge to look. And as it lifted off and I irised it down to where I thought I was, and then I looked up real quick. And of course, then I didn't pull it down fast enough and it bloomed out, and the video, it wasn't usable, but you can't not look at a shuttle launch, or any launch.
Are you going down to Boca Chica and looking at the Starship Super Heavy?
Interestingly enough, the Rio Grande Valley is where I worked for many years and where my wife is from. And so we go back on a regular basis. COVID kind of slowed that down, but I just found some pictures and some video I shot back in 2016 when they had just started construction down there. And I shared some of it on Instagram. And I got to share it on my Reddit page too. And so, yeah, I've been going down there regularly, and I was able to go down when was it? May 1st, yeah, early May we went down. It was when SN15 was still sitting on the pad. And at that time, it was like any minute it was going to launch. And so I was hoping to run down there. So we ran down there, got to go by there. And of course, the last time I was there, it was like, I think the last time I was there was 19. So they really, the Starship portion of it hadn't really taken off yet. It's been such the development there has been amazing. It's incredible how quickly they've done it. And my hat's off to not only just Elon, but everybody who works there. I personally want to go work there if I can. In fact, my retirement plan now is when I get done doing this, remote television for the big networks, is to retire down there in the Rio Grande Valley and go work for SpaceX doing television. But I'd be in my 80s by that point, so I'm not sure that's going to happen. But yeah, I've tried to do everything I can to get down there to go see that, because just the video alone, and even if you're over on South Padre Island watching it, that's amazing to see, especially when they were, rutting, rapid unscheduled disassembly. That just to see that, because you don't generally see that in development like that. There's, when they test somewhere out. It's not on the news. But boy, every time one of those Starships came down and came apart, it was on the news. Everybody saw it. So, and be honest, that kind of has a little bit of a negative connotation, because people see that and they go, "Oh, SpaceX has no idea what they're doing. Look at, they're crashing these things." But they don't understand Elon's methodology to it. Rapid prototyping, rapid development, and you learn what you can as fast as you can. And it proved out. 15 landed. Oh, that's all we've done. We've learned everything. Now they're building up the launch tower, and everybody's like, "Well, when are they going to launch next?" Well, first they got to build the launch tower, and you can watch it. NASAspaceflight.gov or NASAspaceflight.com. You can tune any minute, and they're stacking, and they're stacking. In fact, I started putting that on at work and in the hotel. I'll just put it on as a background and go check out what they're doing, because SpaceX owes those guys a lot of thank yous, because they show everything, and SpaceX basically just does their job and don't worry about it. They'll get out there to the public.
I saw a job posting a few months back for Brownsville for SpaceX as a content creator. somebody to actually go around and film the people working and the whole
Oh,
project
cool.
and create content and stuff, I'll take a look and see if it's still out there because I think that'd be a perfect fit for you.
Well, I'm more of an engineer than a camera operator, but I know how to do all that stuff. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I got a few more years on my commitment here for the company I'm working for. But not that I wouldn't think about it. But then that's something I'm talking about Brownsville. Brownsville's not, is considered one of the poorest areas in the country. It's even not just Texas, but the whole country. And the job boom that's happening there is people don't understand how big it is for Brownsville, the job program down there. I mean, and that's what the space program to a lot of people is, just a jobs program, but they're creating a whole industry down there. And they're like, well, they're going to move that once they get it all finished, they'll move it over to Kennedy. No, Elon's committed to it's Starbase Texas is going to be a place where they build starships until they don't build starships. And they go, well, how do you get them up? Well, you fly them over, you launch them and land them at Kennedy. I mean, it's going to be like an airliner. That's the whole point of this, is to treat space flight like it's an airline, like every day, which is, it took me a while to really come to grips with that whole concept. But from an engineering standpoint too, the development, but you see what the amazing feats they've, places they've gotten to. Brownsville, I'm very, very happy to see Brownsville and the Rio Grande Valley as a whole benefiting from this, because like I said, I still have family down there, and anything that benefits the valley benefits them, benefits it all here in Texas too.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's kind of amazing to think that Brownsville is going to be the gateway to the solar system.
Oh, and I remember, I specifically remember when they announced that deal that SpaceX was going to be moving to Brownsville to do that Boca Chica, and I spent quite a few years just as a unmarried man running around the Rio Grande Valley and South Padre Island and Boca Chica. You go down there, go to the beach and so forth, and I was like, oh my God, how are they going to build something down there? And then of course you go and look at what was Cape Canaveral like when they got there? Just mosquitoes and sand. Well, that's pretty much what you got there. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that could happen. But I remember when that first came out going, oh, this is going to be good. And of course, at that time, Starship didn't even exist. They were just going to start. They knew they wanted their own launch facility they could control. And State of Texas basically said, you can launch whenever you want. We don't care. So imagine they were talking about launching Falcon Heavies from there. Can you imagine that?
Mm.
Let alone whole starships and super heavies. I mean, I'm so excited to be able to go down there and see a super heavy launch. That's going to be the most mind blowing thing. Something that big. I mean, you won't have to be close. Trust me, you won't have to be close. At South Padre Island is going to be. They need to start building more hotels facing south. So everybody, I mean, you could build a 50-story hotel with 1,000 rooms all facing south, and you'd sell it out.
Well, in South Padre Island, I was there for spring break. I was hoping to see, I think, the SN11 launch, but that didn't quite work out. And the amphitheater right there on the south side of the island, it
Yeah,
faces the launch site. It's like perfect.
I actually saw a petition to tear down the stage portion of it so you could have a better view. Like, no, let's not go crazy, okay?
Yeah. Plus, hopefully, what you want to see isn't on the ground for long.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. That's 99% of your viewing time is going to be doing this.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could probably talk for hours and hours. And I volunteer at Space Center Houston once a month. So
Oh yeah,
maybe
you're in Houston. I realize that. What part of Houston?
I'm in North Houston, so near Tomball Spring.
Oh, my daughter lives up in Spring.
Oh, wow. Well, if you're ever in the area,
Yeah.
maybe you could drop by.
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to talk more. I can never talk enough about space.
We have a North Houston Space Society, which is a chapter of the National Space Society that we put together. We have monthly meetings.
Well, that would be great. I just
but-
joined the Planetary Society just because I figured it was time.
Yeah. I mean, so I'd love to have you involved in that if you're
Sure.
interested.
If you could send me that info, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
cool.
Well, you have a good rest of your day, and look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, me too. Hey, listen, let me know when you finish this so I can post it to social media and everything, get you as much coverage as possible.
I really appreciate that. I like to say that the audience for this project haven't even been born yet, but it's okay to start a little early.
Yeah, but it's interesting the way you brought that up. I was talking about oral history earlier. Part of a lot what we did in the mid '90s was part of the oral history office at NASA was when we got the HD camcorders in the mid 90s, they had one for flight and one for training. Well, we got the training camera to train the astronauts. So we had that camera, so we shot everything on it. So we started shooting the oral history in HD in 95 or 94, actually, if I remember correctly. And we continued that on as long as we could. And that has paid off huge dividends to the oral history project because it basically future proofed all that material. And so I think of this as kind of in that same vein. It's oral history that can be used for future historians or just people who are interested to see what the world was like. I mean, this is a slice of Americana, slice of the world. I'm assuming you're interviewing people from all over the world as best you can.
Um, yes, before the COVID thing, my plan was to interview people in person.
Hmm.
I did travel to the UK, so I've interviewed people in like London, York, and Edinburgh. So that's kind of neat. But with the COVID lockdowns, I had to switch to doing things on Zoom. So
Yeah,
I interviewed people in India, Pakistan, Egypt, Peru,
yeah,
Brazil, lots of other places.
yeah. Well, it's kind of one of those benefits of a disaster kind of thing. You know, find the silver lining of anything. But yeah, I can see. Like I was telling earlier, it's quite a momentous job you've given yourself. But the technology is helping, I'm sure.
It is. It is. Yeah. I was hoping to go back to all in-person interviews, but finding time to go and find people in person randomly, that
Yeah.
takes time, and it's hard to do with a work schedule and stuff.
Yeah, and well, and since everything that's happened, this is kind of accepted now, so might as well take advantage of it.
Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right,
Well, take care and be well.
you too. Thank you. I'm looking forward to talking to you again.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.